It's an alert on C5N because Javier Milei received a complaint for his statements in Brazil, statements that sparked one of the most significant diplomatic conflicts in recent times. We're going to talk about it in a moment, Vane. But what is the complaint against the president about? Yes?
The complaint is for embezzlement of public funds. It's actually about his statements, but it also has to do with the use of public resources for an event that is partisan in nature in another country.
The president's partisan trip? Of course.
The complaint points to that state resources, public resources, are being used to finance an event for a political group, the Bolsonaro supporters. And he's also getting involved in Brazil's internal politics, using national resources, using the presidential plane, using the official entourage and money that belongs to the public treasury. This is what a criminal complaint says, which was filed today during the judicial recess at the Comodoro courts. PI, which has already been assigned, was filed by lawyers led by José Machion Calda. And what they say is that Milei's conduct distorts the purpose of public funds. They cannot be diverted to an act that is partisan, a political event, like the launch of Flavio Bolsonaro's candidacy. Well, here the complaint says verbatim, state resources were diverted to satisfy the interests of a political faction, also causing severe harm to diplomatic relations. Because the complaint also emphasizes the statements, what you just mentioned, the statements made by Milei regarding Lula da Silva, and also regarding a high judge of Brazil's Supreme Court, whom he also will use some pretty harsh terms for this judge. The truth is that's also noted, as pointed out in the complaint.
But did you see that story about Milei, huh? Me? Yeah.
Or I can narrate here for those who are listening to us. It's the president of Argentina who carried out a very harsh fiscal adjustment at the expense of a significant portion of the population who are now experiencing brutal impoverishment, with Argentina still under heavy inflationary pressure.
Dario Durigão, our Minister of Finance, responded to the statements made by the President of Argentina.
We'll watch a clip on the screen.
He says, the clown president of Argentina came to Brazil yesterday and talked about Brazil when Argentina's country risk is much higher. The public debt is much higher, their inflation is much higher, so you can't go along with these people who say it's going to be the apocalypse, that there will be problems, right, that there will be trouble. Country risk is an indicator that measures, let's say, the likelihood of a government honoring or not honoring its debts and financial commitments.
The insults Milei directed at Brazil was serious, so the governor of the province of Buenos Aires is taking a stand to try to ease diplomatic relations between the two countries.
Yeah, there's even a part there at the end of that post where, in quotes, he says, right, Brazil is our main trading partner. With these provocations, Milei is putting at risk investments, exports, thousands of jobs, and Argentina's interests. All just to support a candidate under Trump's orders. He's even comparing Javier Milei's behavior to that of the right-wing leader Donald Trump. The relationship with Brazil requires responsibility. Responsibility, not provocations. We can see that he takes a stance without necessarily supporting, for example, the Brazilian government or President Lula. He is actually neutral in this stance, but he brings up Argentina's interests in this commercial relationship with Brazil and is drawing a parallel between Milei's behavior and Trump's.
The person who made an official statement was Chancellor Mauro Vieira through an interview on the TV Globo show Fantástico. The Minister of Foreign Affairs described them as harsh, rude, and unacceptable. This, in a way, is Brazil's official statement, right? Because it comes through the ambassador. And he said, we need explanations from the Argentine government about why the president of Argentina came to Brazilian territory to make this kind of harsh, rude, and unacceptable statement. The whole episode is extremely serious and unacceptable, but we have to work towards understanding between nations. Diplomacy is built on dialogue. And then earlier, Itamaraty also announced that Vieira had already summoned the Argentine ambassador Daniel Raimondi to convey the Brazilian government's rejection of the insults made by Javier Milei and to demand explanations about the behavior of the Argentine leader on Brazilian territory. So this ends up being Brazil's official response to Milei's statements. At this point, Professor Merovich, I just wanted to clarify, right, when President Lula says, we're not going to let anyone interfere in the Brazilian election, and then Milei comes and makes these statements, can this be understood as interference? What kind of interference, both from Milei and Trump, right, which is also something we've been following, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. What kind of interference is this? What kind of interference other presidents and other countries can have in the Brazilian election, and what precautions does Brazil need to take right now to defend its democracy, Professor Merovich?
Well, first of all, we have to note and emphasize that Ambassador Mauro Vieira's response is the correct one in light of international law. It's a tough response, but respectful, with clear arguments and justification. So that's the point to highlight. Second, interference. Interference in a sovereign state should not happen because states are nations. It's Brazilian action that decides electoral matters. It's the Brazilian people who, in the democratic system, which is ours, choose their representatives and their leaders. So anything that comes from outside, from other countries, represents a serious violation of international law because it's a violation of sovereignty. That's why Lula has this position, a firm position, by the way, in response to this offense against sovereignty. Now, we have to highlight this, and it's also important, Janina Josias, it's a legal aspect, an aspect from a legal standpoint, because you both analyze and have analyzed very well in depth the whole political issue. But what should the perspective be?
Legal, when the Minister of Finance calls the head of state of Argentina a clown.
Well, technically, mind you, I'm speaking in technical terms, does the Minister of Finance have authority? What does a statement from the Minister of Finance represent? Technically, constitutionally, the Minister of Finance is an agent. He acts under the authority of the President of the Republic. He does not have his own authority. He is an agent acting under that authority. So, when he speaks as an agent acting under Lula's authority, who is the head of state? What does he repeat? The president's opinion. So, when the Minister of Justice calls the head of state a clown, actually, I'm going to use the expression that Josias used. He is a ventriloquist dummy because he is an agent acting under Lula's authority. And he doesn't apparently have the slightest idea, or he's just talking without realizing that he's speaking on behalf of the President of the Republic. In other words, his statement, besides being rude, is unbecoming of a minister. What did he represent with that statement?
He echoed the president because he acts under the president's authority.